Hello, this is the second video in our three-part series on summary, paraphrase, and direct quotes. We have already discussed how summary, paraphrase, and direct quotes are excellent ways for you to support your own ideas in your own compositions, but we're thinking about when to use one over the other and what is the difference between the three of them. This video is going to focus on paraphrase. So what is a paraphrase? What makes it different from a summary? When do you use a paraphrase instead of a summary? Well, we've already talked about how a summary takes a large amount of information and distills it down into a smaller bit of information. Paraphrase is different. In a paraphrase, we're taking the same amount of information, we're rewriting it or rephrasing it in our own words, and putting out approximately the same amount of information or the same amount of words. So why would we do this? Why not just use a direct quote? Well, we use a paraphrase if we're trying to assist our readers in understanding a difficult concept or terminology. For example, if you're writing an essay and you are trying to cite another work that uses a very complicated word or a complicated idea, you may rephrase that in order to break the concept down so that it is more familiar to your audience. We might also use a paraphrase when the original ideas of the source text are impressive or interesting, but the wording is either confusing or not impressive at all. We can also use paraphrase if we want to change the emphasis of the ideas in order to match our own context. And this is related to the final example. We want to avoid overusing direct quotes. Direct quotes are great ways to add ethos and credibility to our writing. However, if we use too many direct quotes, we run the risk of losing our voice or creating a kind of mismatch in our writing between our voice and the voice of the other writers that we are citing. So these are all excellent reasons to use paraphrase. But what is a paraphrase? What does it look like? Let's go in and take a look at a few examples. This example comes from your Rules for Writers textbook, and we're going to take a look at this original source, and then we're going to compare it to the paraphrase. This, of course, is the same source we examined in the summary video. The original source reads, "A question that is often posed to the NOAA Marine Debris Program is how much debris is actually out there. The MDP has recognized the need for this answer, as well as the growing interest and value of citizen science. To that end, the MDP is developing and testing two types of monitoring and assessment protocols. One, rigorous scientific survey, and two, volunteer at sea visual survey. These types of monitoring programs are necessary in order to compare marine debris, composition, abundance, distribution, movement, and impact data on national and global scales." Now, if you remember, our summary took this passage and just distilled down the key ideas. But what our paraphrase is going to do is essentially take the same ideas and just rephrase them in a different way. So let's go ahead and take a look at the paraphrase. The paraphrase reads, "Citizens concerned and curious about the amount, makeup, and locations of debris patches in our ocean have been pressing NOAA's Marine Debris Program for answers. In response, the organization is preparing to implement plans and standards for expert study and non-expert observation, both of which will yield results that will be helpful in determining the significance of the pollution problem." Now, what I think is great about this paraphrase is that, again, it's expressing the same ideas, but it is both changing the emphasis and breaking the concept down into a package that is much easier for the audience to digest. The first thing I want to point out is that in the original, we are told that the MDP, or NOAA's Marine Debris Program, has recognized the need to answer growing interest in science. So in this case, it's the MDP that is doing the change or initiating the change. In our paraphrase, it's the citizens that are pressing on NOAA in order to make the change. So it's just a little bit of a change in emphasis. This time it's the citizens who are concerned and curious that are pressing NOAA to make the change. In the second sentence, what I think is really interesting is that the writer chooses to use more simple terminology in order to express the ideas in the original source. For instance, the writer says that the NOAA is implementing plans and standards for expert study and non-expert observation. And then the result of this expert study and non-expert observation will help us determine how big or how significant the pollution problem is. Compare that with the original. Instead of expert and non-expert opinion, we have protocols for 1, rigorous scientific survey, and 2, volunteer at sea visual survey. Well, those of us who are not steeped in scientific language may feel a little off-put by words like monitoring and assessment protocols or rigorous scientific survey. So what is another word for rigorous scientific study? Experts. And what is another word for volunteer at sea visual surveys? Non-experts, right? So we've taken those two terms and just simplified them for our audience. Then instead of describing all of the different things that the program is going to monitor, right? The debris, the composition, the abundance, the distribution, the movement, again, these scientific terms, instead our paraphrase have just said, we're going to look at these results so that we can see how significant they are in determining the pollution problem. So again, this paraphrase has used essentially the same amount of language, it's communicating the same ideas, but it is shifting the emphasis and it's simplifying the language through which those ideas are communicated. Let's take a look at another example. Oftentimes, when students start out writing paraphrase, they make the mistake of accidentally plagiarizing. So it's important to note that when you are paraphrasing someone else's ideas, even if you're not using their direct words, you have to use a citation, an in-text citation and an end-of-text citation. One of the ways that we can more easily write paraphrases is by examining the original text and sort of outlining what the key ideas are that the writer is trying to communicate. So the example on the screen in front of you comes from Malcolm Gladwell's Small Change, Why the Revolution Will Not Be Tweeted. Let's take a look at this passage and its outline and then see how that can help us roll into a paraphrase of sorts. So the original text reads, "The platforms of social media are built around weak ties. Twitter is a way of following or being followed. Twitter is a way of following or being followed by people you may have never met. Facebook is a tool for efficiently managing your acquaintances, for keeping up with people who you would not otherwise be able to keep in touch with. This is a wonderful thing. There is strength in weak ties," sociologist Mark Granovetter has observed. "Our acquaintances, not our friends, are our greatest source of new ideas and information." So what are the key ideas what are the ideas that the writer is getting across here? Well, one, social media is a weak tie, is equated to weak ties. It does two things. It helps us keep up with friends, and it helps us stay in contact with those we don't know in real life. And then the writer goes on to emphasize that weak ties have benefits. The way he does that is by citing the sociologist Mark Granovetter, who concludes by saying that our acquaintances, not our friends, are our source of new ideas and information. So let's roll that into a paraphrase. The original source is on top. The paraphrased is on bottom. Let's take a look at the paraphrase. "Social media allows individuals to keep up with friends and maintain contact with professional networks, whom they may not know in real life. Moreover, weak ties have benefits. According to Mark Granovetter, weak ties, including social media, connects us to acquaintances who are a great source of new ideas and information." In our paraphrase, we've been able to include all of the key ideas of the original text, but we've rephrased them so that they match our own voice. Notice too that at the end of the paraphrase, we've included an end-of-text citation so that we know that this collection of ideas came in fact from Malcolm Gladwell. Our next video is going to talk about direct quotes and how to integrate direct quotes in order to support your own writing.